Okay, so let's get started. Borders. My very first teacher was Jewel Marie Smith. And it was Jewel Marie when she was in her heyday of teaching borders. That's something that she became very well known for. And I didn't know it at the time. I had literally been hooking 2 weeks, stumbled on the solder event. It's an hour away from me. So I signed up. I signed up for the longest class I could find, which was a 2-day class. I didn't realize they had what they called retreats, which were 4-day classes. And of course, by the time I figured that out, those 4-day classes were over with. So I've learned and I know now. So I've been going every year now since 2000. So next year coming up will be my 20th year attending solder. It's a really great camp. If you get a chance to go there, be sure to go. But what that did is it created sort of an awareness in me about borders. And I became very aware and I started studying borders and what makes a border good and what makes a border bad, because there are some bad borders. But let's first talk about why I think you need a border on most rugs, even if it's just a few rows of something solid. And when I say solid, I usually mean a texture. I just mean hooked, solid with no design, okay? The first reason is that it frames the piece. I just like the way it looks when a piece is framed. Rather than having the design just sort of end at the end of the rug, I like it to sort of be hugged by a border. So there's the aesthetic of it. A border on the edge of your rug will actually straighten out your hooking. So if you've got a design, particularly like a geometric, where you've got hooking that comes into the border and hooking that goes alongside it, that's going to put different pressures on the backing. And what happens is you're going to end up with a curvy outline on your rug, even if you're using rug warp. It's going to be worse on linen. And heavens to Betsy, hopefully you're not using monk's cloth because that stuff is nasty. So monk's cloth or linen or rug warp and linen are the two backings that I recommend. And I recommend rug warp because it doesn't show that curvy line quite as much. It'll still do it. But by adding several rows of straight hooking, you get away from that tension enough that it straightens out the rug. Now, from a historical or a conservation point of view, that edge that is hooked with just straight rows can be easily ripped out. Jesse Tremaine calls that a sacrificial edge, meaning that edge can be ripped out, it can be sacrificed, and then the rug turned back under and a new edge added to the rug. Now, conserving a rug is difficult and a lot of work. In fact, what I have sitting on the desk or on the table back there is an old Oriental that a friend of mine hooked that I am fixing for her husband. She passed away about a year ago. And so I am repairing that. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So if you can make it easier for the conservator by having straight rows around the outside edge, it's going to cost less for whoever's getting it repaired, which means it's more likely to get repaired and more likely to not become a scrap that ends up in the garbage heap. Okay, so a sacrificial edge. So the main reasons for a border is it just plain makes it looks nice. It'll straighten out your edge if there's any uneven tension. And that has nothing to do with the way you hook. It has to do with the direction of the hooking. And it's also good for a sacrificial edge for 50 years from now, or in the case of burlap, 20 years from now, when it needs to be conserved and repaired, then they'll have something that can be ripped out and repaired easily. But what if you want to add a border? Okay, so you've looked at my reasons and you're convinced, yes, that's a good reason. I want to add a border to my rug, but you don't have enough backing. What do? Let's look at an image. Let me pop this up for you. So imagine this is a pattern you've created. And this is a pattern that I created a few years ago. I use it a lot when I'm teaching a class about how to hook pine trees or trees in general. The red tree that you see in the front is best hooked with my birch bark wool. So it's optional. You can leave it out. Or if you've got some birch bark, it's a great look to get that birch bark hooked in right there. So normally what would happen to add a border around the rug is you would simply draw a line around the outside and encase it completely, right? And then from there, you would add a border. But what if you didn't leave enough backing? And you always want to leave way more backing than you think you do. I tend to leave anywhere from 18 to 24 inches. Yes, you heard that right. And the main reason is even if I don't expand the rug and make it bigger, when I cut off that piece, I can still use it. It's not waste. If it's only 6 inches, what I'm cutting off is garbage and I have to throw it away. So it does give your edge a second life. So instead of adding a border to the outside of this rug, let's add a border to the inside. Okay. I love doing this technique. It gives you a chance to take some of the motifs and push them out into the border, which breaks up the solidness of the border. It softens those lines a little bit and just makes it a whole lot more fun. Now, not all patterns will work this way, but experiment with that idea. So if you can't go out with a border, consider going in. Now, how do you decide what to hook a border with? Okay, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And one thing, when I say what to hook it with, I'm talking about the color planning of hooking your border. How do you decide what you want? And I always go back to paper. I'm a firm believer in a value study, and this is a value study of borders on a rectangular rug. Okay, every combination that you can pretty much come into using light, medium, and dark. Starting in the upper left, you can do a light background with a light border. You can do a light background with a medium border, and so on and so forth. So that diagonal across the middle is when you have the values exactly the same. It gives a different look to the rug. It generally makes the rug appear a little bit bigger because you're not boxing it in, but you're losing an opportunity to bring in a little bit more information. Is there a right or a wrong way? No, there's been a general guideline around the internet and in rug hooking classes that you hook a dark border on the outside. Now, it doesn't always have to be dark. It can just be darker. Okay, as in the case of the one in the top row in the center. We've got a light background with a medium border. Okay, that works just fine. Now, what are my favorites? My favorites are the ones where the background and the border are closer in value. Not the same, but they're closer. So the one in the upper right, for my taste level, that particular one seems too drastic. So I like the one below it. I like the medium border with the dark background, and I like the one at the top that we talked about in the center, light background with a medium border. But I've done all sorts of other ones too. But work this up and decide which one do you like the most. Just looking at this, which one grabs you and you go, ooh, I like that. Now, if you're using the same value, for instance, lights or mediums or darks, they don't have to be the same color. We're not eliminating color here. They can be. They can be the exact same wool if you want. But you have the option of changing the color. But what you need to decide first is what is the change, if any, in value. Okay. So even if we don't change what's on the inside and what's on the outside, what if we add a beauty line? Okay. Here's a thin lime green beauty line on a dark background with the dark border. It changes it very drastically from not having anything to sort of call that out. And a beauty line is simply a line that separates the background from the border. Think of it like a mat, where you've got artwork and you're matting it, and they've cut an edge that exposes a white line or a black line. That's kind of the closest thing in real life that I can think of that would be a beauty line. And I don't know where the name came from, but it's been used quite a bit, so it's stuck. Now, having a skinny beauty line is one option, but what if we actually make a thicker beauty line? What does that look like? Now the beauty line becomes a little bit more of an interrupter, which isn't necessarily bad, but it breaks up those spaces even further. Other ways to think about the beauty line. What if you did it in beaded stitch? And the beaded stitch, if you're a member of the Rug Cooking Journey, there's a course in that membership called Creative Stitches. And in that course, there's a lesson called the beading stitch. Check out that beading stitch lesson and think about that as a beauty line. It creates a very subtle beauty line. But what does it look like if we do change the values? Here we've got a medium background with a dark border and a very thin lime green beauty line, very subtle, almost a glow around the background. And then if we make it thicker and it becomes more of a statement, then you can see that. But you lose that illusion of the glow that we got on the other one. So there's not one thing that's right and one thing that's wrong. It's just a matter of what you're looking for to do your particular piece. Now, how do you hook it? What direction do you hook a border in? Now, if it's got a design, you're going to have to hook it more like you hook the center of the rug. Always with a straight row around the outside edge. And then I prefer the jigsaw puzzle background, so it'd be curvy, twisty lines to fill it in. If you're doing straight rows, then what I recommend is you do not hook that outside edge, at least not at first. What you're going to do is start from the beauty line and work your way out. Now, sometimes you don't know how many rows you want to hook. So what you'll do, and I usually do this around a corner because it gives you a real good visual of what it's going to look like. I'll hook a couple of partial rows and just sort of stack them up until I look at it and go, yeah, that looks right. And then I'll go ahead and determine that that's where I'm going to end it. And then from there, you just continue the lines. But if you hook from the inside out, that's a process I call building. And that's a process that I usually use for hooking houses, which is why I call it building. So what that means, let's say you've got a primitive house that looks like this. Okay, very simple. The mistake that a lot of people will make is they'll hook from the top down and then the top down, or top down, then top down, whatever. But what happens is they don't always meet up perfectly at that eaves trough. And that's where you want to hook. You want to start there and then work your way out in both directions. Because what's important is that we end up with full rows there, not full rows at the top or bottom. Because if the roof is a half a row too short or half a row too big, same on the ground, it's not going to make a difference. So, but that will make a difference on how it fits there. A tip that we're not really talking about today, but if there were windows in this house, I would also hook the siding until I skim the top of the windows. Then I come in and I'll hook the tops of the windows and start hooking down on both sides. I'll continue with the siding until I get a full piece. I'll run that siding all the way through, and then I'll finish up the windows, and then I hook the windows. I know a lot of other teachers teach to hook the windows first, but I find that makes it very difficult to get them to line up right. And if you look at older houses, I don't know how important it is in today's construction, but in older houses, the carpenters took great pride in putting a full piece of siding across the top, and then the window ends right where another piece of siding begins. So pay attention to that as you're out in the neighborhood taking your walks, and really pay attention to that and see that, that's how it is in real life. So let's duplicate this in our construction on our rugs, right? So that's pretty much the lesson for borders. Experiment with it. Use that trick to build the border around a corner and see what it looks like. If you're not sure of your border, even if it's a designed rug that has a border on it, hook that corner first and look at it and go, do I like it? Do the colors look right? Do I need to add something to it? Rather than hooking like all the leaves and then coming back and hooking all the flowers and then hook all the background and then, oops, it's not working. Okay. So hook a little bit as a sample, concentrate on a corner and see if it works. That's it for today's lesson. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.